Astronaut, John, emerges from a hibernation cycle aboard the spacecraft Odyssey 1, which is headed for Saturn's moon, Titan. The mission of the ship is to journey to Titan, gather a substantial amount of natural resources, including methane, for use on Earth, and then return. Given the multi-year duration of the voyage, the crew undergoes several cycles of being awake and asleep during their transit through space. Approximately every 90 days, the crew wakes up to conduct routine inspections and maintenance, communicate with Earth, and confirm they are on the correct course, before entering drug-induced hibernation once more. John reconnects with the rest of the crew, Captain Franks, the mission leader, and Nash, an aeronautics expert. They are welcomed by Sam Napier from Houston, Texas, who reminds everyone to complete their regular psychological evaluations between cycles, and to take them seriously. As Odyssey's calming onboard computer reminds them after every hibernation cycle, the drugs they take have side effects, including confusion, nausea, dizziness, and disorientation. Sam also informs them that only 2 more cycles remain until they reach Jupiter's orbit, where a slingshot maneuver around the planet will propel them towards Titan. John is unsettled by how disoriented hibernation has left him, to the point where he can't remember his girlfriend Zoe's last name, and hears her voice in whispers. Nash reassures him that the powerful drugs used for hibernation affect everyone, and comes with significant side effects, and that his memory will return in time. The crew then checks the ship's systems, and reports back to Earth that they remain on course for the most difficult phase of their journey, a slingshot maneuver around Jupiter, that will give them a tremendous speed boost, propelling them towards Titan. It is also revealed that they've already been in space for 9 months. John feels relieved when he finally recalls Zoe's last name by remembering how they met.
Zoe Morgan.
And the crew returns to hibernation. Upon the next awake cycle, John is the first to wake up, and the Odyssey's computer informs him that they have been in space for a total of 1 year and 5 days. As he continues his work, the Odyssey suddenly malfunctions, triggering a warning. He notices a loose ceiling panel and is struck on the head when it falls, knocking him unconscious. Captain Franks and Nash finds him, and John explains the situation when the panel fell and hit his head. They then discover that the ship seems to have sustained some sort of impact, causing damage to the hull and a few internal components. However, the ship's computers show no record of any impact or damage. Captain Franks suggests that the ship may have warped due to structural strain, and instructs John to report the situation to Earth. Nash grows increasingly paranoid and worried that the ship's computer system and structural integrity have been compromised. He believes that the Odyssey cannot withstand the stress of using the thrusters during the slingshot maneuver, and fears the crew will die if they proceed to Titan. Nash advises that they should abort the mission and return to Earth. However, Captain Franks insists they continue as planned until they receive confirmation from ground control of any additional risks. Later, Nash tries to convince John to mutiny against Captain Franks to save their lives. Nash plans to set their hibernation pods to wake them 12 hours early, allowing them to reprogram the ship to slingshot back toward Earth, and return home. John agrees, but warns he will only participate in the mutiny if there is sufficient evidence that the ship is truly compromised. John and Nash wake up from hibernation ahead of schedule. Nash, in a panic, insists that they can't trust the ship's systems and that they are all doomed, but John argues that there isn't enough evidence of any damage and believes they should continue the mission. At that moment, Captain Franks reveals himself. He had been secretly monitoring them and knew of their plan to wake up early, so he woke up as well to intervene. Concerned about the escalating conflict between himself and Nash, Captain Franks advises John not to take sides, as doing so would further escalate the situation. He reassures John that he will definitely abort the mission if any conclusive evidence arises, but for now, he attributes Nash's paranoia to the side effects of drug-induced hibernation. Since the calculations are already programmed into the computer, the slingshot maneuver will proceed with or without Nash's involvement, leaving Nash furious. In the next scene, Captain Franks and John prepare for the slingshot maneuver, despite Nash's objections. 30 seconds into Jupiter's orbit, John is tasked with cutting the thrusters at the exact moment to ensure the ship aligns correctly on its course to Titan. They successfully execute the slingshot maneuver, putting the ship on track for Titan. They all enjoy the accomplishment. Meanwhile, Nash spirals further into paranoia, convinced they will all die if they don't return to Earth. John's condition also begins to deteriorate, as he starts hallucinating, seeing Zoe on the ship and experiencing waking dreams where the ship is damaged, which caused him to be sucked out into the void of space. The crew then returns to hibernation. Upon the next awakening, Nash's mental state has clearly worsened. He is unable to remember his parents' names or details about his life, even cannot remember his own name. He claims to have found a problem with the reactor's output, warning that if it isn't fixed, they will never reach Titan, and asks John to verify his findings. However, John notices Nash's deteriorating condition, pointing out that he has been uploading data into a dead screen. Meanwhile, John's own mental state continues to decline as well. Captain Franks confirms the reactor performance, then reveals that the issue is man-made and pulls out a gun. John's passcode was used to reduce the reactor output. Captain Franks believes Nash used John's code to sabotage the ship, and states he will not allow anyone to disrupt their mission. Captain Franks decides that Nash will be forced back into sleep to avoid further sabotage, and escorts the two men to their hibernation pods under the threat of gun violence. John is put to sleep first, and as the drugs take over, he witnesses Captain Franks brutally attack Nash, likely killing him. John awakens from hibernation, to find that Nash is missing during this awake cycle. While searching for Nash, Captain Franks confronts him, carrying a pistol at all times, and determined that their mission will not be jeopardized. John accuses Franks of harming Nash, but Franks explains that Nash had become increasingly unstable, and he had to subdue him until they reach Titan. Franks then orders John to run a diagnostic on the X-band communication system to restore contact with Earth. Meanwhile, John begins experiencing severe auditory and visual hallucinations, believing that Zoe is trying to communicate with him through short-range radios. He also hallucinates that his body is mutating. Despite being on course, they have been unable to communicate with Earth since the first awake cycle. Captain Franks accuses John of losing his grip on reality and focus, revealing that Zoe was never real, but rather part of a psychological test to assess John's fitness for the mission, a claim John refuses to accept. In the next scene, a flashback shows how John met Zoe.
Your relationship with Zoe wasn't real. Zoe wasn't planned. She was just doing her job.
Excuse me, is tea taken? It's John, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry.
Morgan.
As the next sleep cycle approaches, Franks follows John to the sleep chamber, pistol in hand, asserting that the mission takes priority, and failure is not an option. Sensing an opportunity, John locks himself in a standoff with Franks, suspecting that Franks killed Nash instead of putting him in forced hibernation. John demands to see Nash before agreeing to return to sleep. Franks tries to reassure him, insisting Nash is fine, and angrily orders John to open the door. A violent struggle ensues, and John manages to overpower Captain Franks, taking the pistol from him. Armed and determined, John sets out to find Nash, but along the way, he begins hallucinating voices, blurring his sense of reality.
You'll never find us! Are we still friends, John?
It's just your...
Frantic, John uses the computer to inquire about Nash's location and status. The computer confirms that Nash is healthy and on the bridge with two other men. To verify, John asks if the entire crew is alive, including Captain Franks. The computer confirms that everyone is alive and on the bridge. When John asks about the crew manifest, it then revealed that this is a one-man mission. John has been alone the entire time, and his full name is Captain John Nash Franks. He has been hallucinating the other crew members since the first hibernation cycle, which is seen in a series of flashbacks. Spiraling into confusion and questioning his reality, John desperately calls for help from the ground control team using short-distance radios. He receives a response from Zoe, which he finds hard to believe since Earth is over 600 million miles away and unreachable by short-distance radio. Zoe reveals to John that he is not actually in space, he has been deceived and is inside a fake ship beneath the company's New Mexico base, which is 1,000 foot underground. She further claims that it is designed to test the hibernation cycles and the effects of isolation before the real mission. John insists that he saw Jupiter, and also performed a slingshot maneuver to Titan, which felt completely real. Zoe explains that everything was simulated, and the communication system is linked directly to the surface above him. She adds that an earthquake damaged the access tunnel and communication lines to the simulation ship, resulting in the hibernation chamber administering excessive drug doses, without the surface's ability to adjust them, leading to his mental degradation. Zoe then encourages him to escape through the airlock to leave the simulated ship, and force their employers to pick him up early. In the next scene, a bloodied Captain Franks urges John to stay committed to the mission, pointing out that he has been hallucinating and that this could be another manifestation of that. He warns John that he has constructed a slightly too plausible story that aligns with everything he wants to believe. Franks tries to prevent him from opening the airlock, fearing it may endanger his life. Despite this, John decides to exit through the airlock, holding a radio to convey his last words of love to Zoe. When the door opens, it becomes clear that John was right. He steps into an underground location, not outer space. The scene reveals that the simulation has been severely impacted by a massive earthquake, damaging much of the internal setup. He also hears Zoe above the surface guiding him towards escape light. As John approaches a red emergency light to ascend a ladder, he experiences a moment of clarity, realizing that he was hallucinating. Before he can act on this realization, he is suddenly sucked out of the airlock and into the void of space, leaving the audience to contemplate the true nature of John's reality and the consequences of his choices.